And I think this is one really significant thing, that when parents, particularly a father, tries to over-control the courtship, he's just sort of like packing down that spring that's going to explode on the other side of marriage.
Right.
That couple is very likely going to push away from that control very quickly.
Boy, it's just so much of the mindset, Kevin. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, somebody comes and you say, "Now, is this the wonderful guy that God has prepared to complete my daughter, and it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful thing? Is this the guy? I want to get to know this guy. If this is what, rather than, are you the guy that's taking my daughter away and you're going to break up our family?
Where's my shotgun?
Right? Yeah. It's all in a mindset.
Yeah,
Trunk monkey. Remember the trunk monkey ones? Yeah. That was the commercials where the guys, he sends a monkey to be the chaperone on everything. But it's all a mindset.
Yeah.
Say, this is the guy that God has sent. Boy, I want to get to know him.
Welcome, friends, to the Generations broadcast, another installment of Discipleship for Dads. And welcome, Todd, Bill, Danny, and myself, Kevin Swanson. Today, the subject is how to navigate relationships with married children. Mm-hmm. And, brothers...
Sounds easy.
Well, is the Christian life easy? This comes down to the Christian life, isn't it?
Yeah.
God puts us through all sorts of tests for our faith and for our love, and relationships themselves, test whether there is love there to begin with. And you find with your teenage children, your older children, that there's still some growth required of yourself. Not just them. God is testing you in this.
Right.
And certainly he's done that with me. So I'm appreciative of the fact that he puts me through trials of my faith, trials of what's really there to begin with. Mm-hmm. And we see that developing throughout the teenage years and then on into the young adult years and then the married years. There's all these challenges placed upon whether or not I am really that believing, trusting, faith-filled, loving kind of guy that I thought I was 10 years ago. And it turns out some growth required still for me. Does anybody else relate to that?
Well, I think, when a child gets married, you're introducing a new person into the relationship, right? So you've got a new person with new gifts and new weaknesses. So, you've got to be able to navigate the new brother and sister in the relationship. And that's, if you don't navigate it well, then that's where the trouble.
Well, it's a new relationship.
Right.
I mean, you've already kind of worked on the last 5 relationships in your life. Now there's number 6 or number 7 showing up.
Right.
And so now, it's going to test you a little bit as to how well you can get on board with this relationship. And to distinguish also, relationship is coming into the orbit with somebody else, a closer orbit, somebody else. And now the test is whether, I'm going to 1 Corinthians 13, love this person in this new relationship. And so that's the test.
Yeah, and a lot of these times there's not only a new relationship, but there's a change of headship sometimes that accompanies when a child gets married. So it's not just a new relationship, but there's also this whole new household that has to be respected by the former household, and so it's almost not just relationships interacting, it's two families interacting.
Mm-hmm.
This is exciting because there's a lot of ungodly teaching in the world around this topic, which basically assumes that grace and reconciliation are not possible. So you just have to isolate family units as much as possible, because we know that people can't change, and so the best way to keep peace is just to keep separation. Right? That's the essence of worldly wisdom.
That's why they call in-laws outlaws.
Exactly. But this is exciting for Christians because God, Jesus can actually help us here.
Well,
and
he's come to redeem and to reconcile.
Exactly.
Right, and to
Bring
break
us
down
closer
the
together.
middle walls of partition. And he does that. And we have to trust that the gospel is big enough for this.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, isn't it, when families, not just brothers, but families can dwell in unity together, how much more beauty, how much more strength, how much more glory is given when all that is synced together with God.
Let's throw out this unrealistic expectations from the fun side. We have unrealistic expectations about ourselves, about the relationship, about how mature we think our children are, or how wonderful the in-law is supposed to be, etc. What is that? What is an unrealistic expectation?
I think expecting your children to do what you did is an unrealistic expectation and just bad. I fully expect that my children will do better than I did. I expect my son to be a better father. I expect my daughter to be a better mother. Therefore, I'm expecting them to do things differently than the way we did it. And I constantly remind my wife not to be offended, and not that she is easily offended or anything, but just not to be offended when they do things differently than we did, because they got one more generation of faith, one more generation of a deeper faith. I think that you come in with the expectation they're going to do things differently and they're going to do them better. Let's anticipate that.
But what if that's too high of an expectation? What if it turns out they make mistakes? What about that? What if they do sin?
They will make mistakes.
What if your children wind up sinning? What about that?
Yeah, that's
part of
gonna
what's
happen.
coming to my mind is like part of the unrealistic expectation is, all right, here's the parent's journey of faith, right? And from here to here, the unrealistic expectation could be that they're going to pick up exactly where you left off.
Yeah.
Perhaps, maybe I will do things better, but I'm probably not going to do them better immediately. It may take me,
learning curve.
5 years to get to that point.
Right. One of the things I think I realized, my children start out more on my shoes than they do on my shoulders.
Exactly.
But they do get a head start. There's no question they get a head start. Yeah. And we appreciate the fact they get the head start. But they're going to have to make some mistakes. And are we willing to walk through that with them?
It's going to take us time to grow.
And be patient with them as they work through those issues. And then, I guess everything that the Word of God brings us is to be forgiving and to roll with it and be long-suffering and to, watch them walk through these things. I think we do want to rush in and save them. What about that? Rushing in to save, right? I mean,
there's only one Savior.
Oh, there's only one Savior, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But, how do we avoid that? How do we avoid the tendency to want to rush in and save the 18-year-old, let alone the 28-year-old?
Well, I mean, we have to trust God, and that God is working in a bigger way than we can see or understand. But I think, you also don't want to be just absent, right? You don't want to just run away from those situations either. So I think it does take discernment to know how to trust God and what He's doing, but also be available and provide input and receive feedback and provide it back. Be available for that. That obviously takes a deeper work of having a good relationship, so you can have open lines of communication and receive counsel from one another.
Now, the biblical standard is men are to leave and cleave, right?
Yeah.
Genesis 2:24 is that for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his own wife, and they two shall be one flesh. So what does that mean? We transfer headship. We typically refer to that. At the wedding ceremony, we're transferring headship. The headship moves from father to husband,
right,
in the case of our daughters marrying some guy. So headship is transferred, which means responsibility for decisions is transferred to the husband who is head of his wife. So that's first. That's a principle. But now how do we interact with this new couple? How do we provide counsel? That's still okay, right? We're still okay to provide counsel.
Well, it's actually, some people don't think it is. I've heard
like no counsel.
Popular Christian teachers say you should never provide unsolicited counsel to your children.
Boy, but does that depend on relationship? Doesn't it? I mean, relationship ties into this.
Right. And it doesn't seem to be exactly Galatians 6:20.
No, or Book of Proverbs,
Yeah.
where, multitude of counsels are safety, etc.
Yeah.
So it does depend on the relationship.
Yeah.
Prior to, this is one reason why, the state of the relationship after the marriage does depend a great deal on the state of the marriage or the relationship before the marriage.
Sure.
How are we doing prior to the marriage? The marriage itself could be a real test as to whether there was a substantial relationship.
Right.
We said the same thing on courtship, right? On the courtship.
Yeah, probably.
The courtship really depends a great deal upon how that relationship was cultivated for the previous 18 years or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and I think when we talk about the parent's role, the parents can affirm some of the things we actually see in Genesis 2:24. So, the parents should go, I know this son is supposed to be cleaving to his wife. Am I encouraging that cleaving happening, and that the two shall become one flesh? Am I encouraging that to happen too? Because it sounds like, from Genesis 2:24, what it's saying is don't get in the, it doesn't say never provide unsolicited advice. It just says don't get in the way of the thing God is doing here. These two need to cleave. These two are one flesh. So don't interrupt that or try to separate that or try to pull that apart, but actually encourage that and be thankful for that and excited about that.
Now, I want to contrast Todd and Bill for just a moment, because there's a slight difference in how your daughters have married, or at least in one case, right? Megan married Danny, as it turns out, and you guys live like right across the street, virtually.
Yeah.
And then Todd, your daughters got married and they moved off to Nebraska,
they both
different
moved.
state.
Yeah, because they married men out of state.
Right, exactly. So is there a difference there? Is there a different kind of relationship that forms as there's more distance, I guess is my question? Or what's the dynamic? What kind of dynamic has formed?
Well, I think the dynamic is that the relationship prior is very important. And I think, when you have one of your children moving away, it's going to affect things. It's going to be a different situation. And so you have to handle that well, prepare for that, and even how to maintain that. Thankfully, we have a wonderful relationship. We talk to them pretty often. But what's interesting is, my daughters have moved about 8 hours from me, but they live literally across the street from
each other,
from the son's, parents. So they're very close to right. So my daughters are very close to her in-laws, as it were, but very far from us. But the relationship's gone well, and I think that brings up another interesting point. I think part of it is because of our relationship with my son-in-law's parents. So it becomes more family to family, bigger picture, and how's that working out, rather than just father to daughter.
So your relationship with your son-in-laws, and by the way, your daughter's married two brothers
yeah.
from the same family,
right, which was convenient.
But your relationship with the family really did play into the healthy relationship that formed with the new households.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think that's something we see biblically too. In many ways, marriage is two families coming together. It's I think in the world, it's just, there's no consideration of the extended family or anything. It's just these two random individuals coming together. But really, that's why we have this transference of names. And it's a much bigger thing than just two individuals. It's two families that God are enjoining. So that's an important relationship.
So,
too.
Bill, off to you for a moment. How did the relationship with your children, Danny in particular, we've got to put this on the table here. It's going to be very transparent. That's what this whole thing's about. How did that form, with Danny in proximity? He's virtually across the street from you. How did that relationship develop?
Boy, I was trying to think how it would be different, because I do have a daughter that lives in another state.
That's right.
And there is a different dynamic for sure. You have to be more intentional about the daily or almost daily communication with the one that's out of state, for sure. My wife is very good about that. But I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it. This is just relationships. The key is you come into marriage realizing this is forever. While you're on this earth, there's no options of moving to another state and getting new friends or things like that. This is a forever thing. So you are invested from the beginning. You're giving, you're serving, you're loving, you're giving room to grow. You're actively loving the other set of in-laws. You're just all in on the love side, so that they know that there's just no friction between you as much as possible. I don't know how else really to say that, except you're loving, you're giving, especially the new one in the family. That's the way I look at it. My daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, just giving them all kinds of love, and their parents.
Where does it go badly? Yeah. Where does that, father and mother exercise a little more of a controlling, here, let me make these decisions for you, sort of a relationship with a new marriage?
I would say the selfishness thing comes in. We always do Christmas together. Well, now they're married. You're not going to do Christmas every year together, right? That would be selfish to think that. and maybe they'll do two Christmases away or three because they live close to us. So give them room to go do 3 Christmases in another state because they don't get to see them that much. So you're thinking very unselfishly about these things, not like you want everything the way it was before, and you're just adding this other person to your family dynamic. You can't do that.
Yeah, and that's what I mean when we look at Genesis 2:24. We think of that verse is really directed towards children or son. Son, go and find yourself a wife. But I think parents of married children really need to take that to heart. It's what you're saying. It's like, no, don't be selfish and say, you got to come to me for Christmas. Say, affirm that he needs to cleave to his wife. They need to become one flesh. Encourage that, support that. That doesn't mean they're always going to be with you. So how can you actually encourage that and recognize we just brought another set of parents into this whole mix, and you need to honor and respect them too, just as brothers and sisters in Christ.
One of the things that I was thinking about, Papa, is the things that you and Mom have done that have been helpful. Number one, you'll have led with service in the relationship, so that that warms the relationship a lot when it's more about how you can help us than the advice you can give to us. And we want your advice, but that sense of we're here to help and support you through sacrifice does a lot. When you approach us, you've approached us with a sense of faith and hope and optimism about our family, and that means a lot. That sense of encouragement. And I think you've also acknowledged, when you do give us advice, you've acknowledged that you just see a snapshot. And I think that's one of the intimidating things, speaking from the perspective of a child, is when your parents are in your home or you're close. Yeah. We as parents, we know our kids do this, and sometimes they do this, and there's a little bit of this fear, like, okay, I appreciate the advice from Mom and Dad, but it's possible they just saw, X child on their worst day, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's helpful when parents acknowledge, hey, we're just seeing a snapshot. Yeah. And then the last thing I appreciate is I think you all have focused on, when you do give advice, focused on the biblical principles and not primarily on making sure that we applied those principles in exactly the same way that you guys did. So those are some things that I think have been helpful.
A couple of the other things that we've learned in terms of our relationship with our married children is that number one is be available to serve and to take care of the children, to babysit the kids for a night out, something like that. That's just to step in and say, how can we just be there for you guys? Secondly is that my son and his wife were very interested in us intentionally planning out when we were going to get together, and planning it out for months at a time, especially if you're busy, which we tend to be. To prioritize those dinners together, literally calendar it out for 3-4 months at a time. My son's in the area, as you know, and that's been really fruitful. Right. Where we know what dates to plan, and those relationships have really formed well through the last number of years because there's some intentionality about getting together. It's not just accidental, like, hey, we'll see each other at church, or we'll kind of brush elbows with us on occasion when we babysit the kids, but no, we'll have this concerted 3, 4, 5 hours on this day. So that's been helpful to us to plan ahead. Certainly for vacations or holidays, things like this. That has been helpful. That, in other words, that intentionality that we care about you, and we're going to prioritize our getting together with you. Over the next year or two, is I think comforting to our children, and it also gives them a chance to, okay, is this enough? Is this too much? How much do you want to interact with us? It gives us that ability to ask those questions and to get their feedback. So if our children are far away, you wind up okay, we're going to visit you during Christmas or whatever, or you're coming over here for Thanksgiving. But I think if you're in the proximity, it's good to just plan ahead and say, hey, let's do these things. Let's plan this time together. So those are some of the things that I have learned. Let's take a break, and when we come back, want to talk a little bit more about how we can be a little more proactive before the marriage to develop good relationships with our children and also with our prospective in-laws. So let's talk about that next on Generation. Stay with us.
What happened to the church? We've traded courage for comfort, conviction for compromise, and what once stood strong now feels like jelly. A gelatinous, feel-good faith that demands nothing and offers even less. That's why Kevin Swanson wrote Strong. It's not a soft book. It's not a safe book. To anyone tired of the lukewarm, the flabby, the fake, this is a call to real strength. Strong grace, strong gospel, strong Savior for those ready to stand firm and strengthen what remains. Grab your copy now at strongthebook.com. That's strongthebook.com. Not for the faint of heart, but for those who know it's time to be strong.
Welcome back, friends, to the Generations broadcast with another segment of Discipleship for Dads. And all of us need some discipleship, and I sit at the feet of these men as well. It's good to have Todd and Bill and Danny here to get to on this subject, how to navigate relationships with married children. That's the question for us. Now, let's talk about how to proactively get ready for this marriage. I think this question is excellent for all of us. What advice would you give young people who are about to get married and looking forward to change in relationships that leave and cleave, and how we can navigate those relationships prior to, such that we've got a pretty decent situation in the married state. So how do we work the courtship? How do we get to know? Todd, you're pretty fresh on this.
Yes.
How did it work for you?
Well, obviously there's a role, I think, in the courtship, for the father of the young lady to get to know the young man. But a lot of this times it's viewed as like a vetting or an interview.
I like to say, here's my daughter. Here's the broken glass, now walk.
right.
Crawl over it.
Right.
Crawl over it. How it's been done sometimes.
Yeah, and right. So that's pretty extreme, but there's certainly some kind of vetting. But I think also it's a relationship. It's a developing relationship. What I really appreciate is I've seen dads enter into this, and they just are getting to know this brother, and then let's say the courtship doesn't work out, but they've gained a brother. They still have this man that they know.
Right.
That's a better picture of it. It's just like, here's a young man, I'm getting to know him. What a blessing. It's another brother in Christ. And just, if that's always, I think, sort of the theme around your approach, it helps not only soften and be honor and respectful to the young man, but also you've established a relationship, so then in marriage, you do know a lot about it.
Is there a goal to establish a friendship that is something of a friendship? I mean, do you want to get to know just as the prospective father-in-law, or as a true friend or a brother in Christ in which we can, edify each other, provoke each other to love and good works?
And that's why that's very important. The friendship aspect's important so that it's not just a one-way, that it's a two-way, it's a mutual edification, as Ephesians 4 says. There's mutual building up of one another. It's not just a hierarchy or something like that. Because that's going to set you up well. The friendship will set you up well for trusting God and not trying to hold a tight grip.
It's interesting. I've formed a very close relationship, I think, with my daughter-in-law's father. We're just good friends.
Yeah.
And then with my daughter-in-law as well. I was thinking on Sunday they came over, and I just sat in the living room, and it was just her over on the couch and me, and we just had a great conversation. So it seems like that formed pretty well prior to the wedding, but then after that, it just continued to develop. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think there is a developing friendship.
Yeah.
And is that a goal? I guess that's my question. Is that a goal?
And I think that's important too. And the having all those conversations are super important. One of the things I love to do with my son-in-laws is go work on their houses with them. I mean, it's just fun. It's a blessing to do. It's starting to. It feels natural. There's a friendship. There's a relationship. And so there's conversations, but there's work. There's ministry. There's all kinds of things you can do together.
It makes a big difference. I had two kind of attempted courtships before Megan, and in both of those situations, I did not feel a significant care about me as an individual, or a desire to have that friendship. When I interacted with Bill, there was a different flavor, and I sensed that you were interested in me as a person, and you were also interested in me taking leadership in the relationship. And I think this is one really significant thing, that when parents, particularly a father, tries to over-control the courtship, he's just sort of like packing down that spring that's going to explode on the other side of marriage.
Right.
That couple is very likely going to push away from that control very quickly.
Boy, it's just so much of the mindset, Kevin. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, somebody comes and you say, "Now, is this the wonderful guy that God has prepared to complete my daughter, and it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful thing? Is this the guy? I want to get to know this guy. If this is what, rather than, are you the guy that's taking my daughter away and you're going to break up our family?
Where's my shotgun?
Right? Yeah. It's all in a mindset.
Yeah,
Trunk monkey. Remember the trunk monkey ones? Yeah, that was the commercials where the guys. He sends a monkey to be the chaperone on everything. But it's all a mindset.
Yeah.
Say, this is the guy that God has sent. Boy, I want to get to know him.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's even happened in our church, where there's a courtship, and it's not just in the dad and mom relationship, but sometimes other people get to know these men. And this happened in our church,
right.
And the courtship didn't even work out, but I'm still good friends with this guy, and I'm thankful for him and happy for him, and it's just it's a blessing.
Yeah.
How do we prepare our children to leave and to cleave? I know in your case, Todd, I think it was a little bit of an exercise of faith, a step out of faith. And marriage is that. Marriage is, we must step out in faith, believing, trusting God in the process. How did that work out for your daughters?
I think it is important to talk about, before the courtship, before they enter into that season of life. It's important to talk about how that's going to go, what that's going to look like. Some of the things we've talked about here today, just talked about openly with your children about those relationships and nurturing those relationships, the intentionality of those relationships. I think I'm slowly realizing it now. When there's for a daughter in particular, not because when you have a home with good relationships, sometimes daughters are like, why am I leaving? This is like a pretty good setup here, But it takes a lot of faith on those daughters' part.
Because they're going to miss their parents. They're going to miss their parents' home.
It's just a big change.
Ruth had to say, your God would be my God, your home would be my home, et cetera.
Exactly.
So it does have to be a step out of faith.
On many levels, it's just a lot of change, and so it takes faith.
I think it's not marriage. It's not a falling off of a cliff. I think this is important. That it's more of a slope. It's easier. It was easier with my son. We started sloping him down. I've mentioned this before. By the time he was ready to get married, it was just a slight push out the door because we had already kind of walked down this slope. There's certain things that you don't do until you're married, and they are off of a cliff. But even with daughters, I think it's slightly more giving them, doing different things, control of this or projects. It's more of a slope down, so that it's just not all of a sudden this huge change when they get married.
Are you saying sloping down the governance?
In terms of responsibilities.
I'd say governance.
Responsibilities, this sort of thing.
Giving a little bit more independence. That they're running their household, they're running the kitchen. You got to slope into it rather than cliff into it. I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying that.
No,
well.
I understand what you're saying.
Makes sense. Yeah, well, you don't want it to be a cliff.
No,
because that's pretty harsh for any heart.
The preparation's just got to be. You got to be better in the preparation.
Right.
Okay, we got to talk about some of the dysfunctional in-law relationships for just a moment, because there are a fair percentage of families out there where there is disunity.
Mother-in-law jokes are only second to lawyer jokes.
Oh, I know.
Did you know that?
I know, and the outlaw in-law thing, but. I think one of the things, we actually do receive a fair number of questions from our listening audience about in-law issues. Like, what are we going to do? A son-in-law issue, or we got a father-in-law who's doing this and too controlling of a mother-in-law. We get these questions on a fairly regular basis. Typically, my answer is, number one, as son-in-laws or sons or daughters, we are not our parents' pastors. That's a a fallback for me.
Yeah.
But number two, it seems to me that being part of a healthy church is so important, especially when it comes to these intra-family issues. So, I mean, one of my big questions is, have you talked to your elders, pastors, counselors about this issue in your neighborhood? A lot of times they don't. Like, we turned out to be their pastors, as Generations talk show people.
We don't want that.
Doesn't really work out that well, right? Is that one of your qualifications? Like, we will serve as pastors of the 48,000 people connecting with our ministry. We don't want to be that.
Virtually without any relationship.
Right, without knowing any of the context, without getting the multiple people into the room, et cetera. So we can't do that, but having that counsel, having that God-established line of counsel there in your local church, and then also at points appealing to the elders / pastors of your children's church, whatever church your children are attending, or whatever church your parents are attending, could be helpful in bringing this together. I can remember one situation in which there was a breakdown in the in-law relationship. And so this would have been like 10, 12 years ago. And then I said, hey, why don't we get together with your parents' pastor? And it was in the metro area, so it was somewhat convenient. And I remember, driving down there, and we had the in-laws, we had the couple there in this room in this little Baptist church, and this pastor was a great pastor. He was a great shepherd. He was a great counselor. And I was like, it worked. It worked. We all got in the same room. Pastor of the children, pastor of the parents / in-laws, and it worked out. And from my understanding to this day, it's functional. So we move from dysfunctional to functional because of the God-appointed pastor / church, relationships in their lives. So I just throw that out. That's just, it's not necessarily a catch-all. It won't solve every problem. But wow, it's first base for any kind of conflicts and difficulties. Because I'll tell you what, we're all going to get through some of these issues.
Yeah, and before it gets to the place where you have to involve elders, and I think it still could be a good thing even early on. But I'm in Luke in my Bible reading, and Jesus gave the story of the Good Samaritan, and it was an answer to who's my neighbor? What kind of neighbor am I supposed to be like? And I was meditating on the fact that there was a broken person. And what was the Samaritan's response to brokenness? It was to give. It was to help. It was to love. And so that's the first path. If you've got a broken relationship, you've got a broken in-law, then you just go and love and serve and give to them and see if God's going to use that that would be my first step. Love, give, and serve the brokenness before you do the confronting of the relationship.
Yeah.
I had a question, Papa. You've talked quite a bit about the idea of this significant optimism and hope and excitement about what children or in-laws are becoming. Great. But what about that situation when you're just really pretty sure what is happening with the kids is bad?
Yeah. Okay. In Danny's case, for example. No, just kidding. But no, hypothetically, it's a great question. What would you do, and how do you handle that?
Yeah. Number one, children are very resilient. Usually you're thinking it's a lot worse than it really is. So usually you give it some more time, give them, first thing you do is give them room, give them time, because it may just be a snapshot, like you're saying before, of what you're seeing. Number two, you come in with lots of questions. You come in with lots and lots of questions. If you really think it's a bad situation, then you come in asking questions. What do you think? What about this? And you might get because you may not have enough information to make any kind of judgment call. That's dangerous. So I would say you come in asking lots of questions.
People get pretty defensive about your critique concerning their child raising, for example.
Oh, yeah.
That's a toughie.
Yeah.
So you do have to come in asking questions.
Right.
I think also just expressing at least that you care and you want the best. and they want the best, obviously, for their children. Nobody wants the worst for kids. So just
could be a season, too.
How's it going? I see you're starting to see some stressful situations going on in the child raising department. Can I pray for this? Or, how can I help? Is there anything we can do? So I suppose that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And I think it also goes back to, what can I do in this situation to love them, to serve them, to help? I think coming along with questions are good. If they're sincere questions, I think we can, when we see something, we're sure it's a problem, our questions can have an accusatory tone. So we have to, again, submit to God and trust God and just appeal to God. Maybe it's a good time to pray first and go, God, I love my children. I love my children. Help me know how to come alongside them in this time. But recognizing they are a family, but also God's put you in a position in relationship of where you can somehow edify them.
And I think starting with the fact that you recognize that raising children is a very difficult job, and it's tougher now. I always say it's tougher now than than it was 20 years ago. Your job is tough, and so you first say, "How can I help you with that?" But you don't want to be accusatory. You got to see that they have a hard path before them. Recognize that and tell them you're ready to help them with it.
And leading up to that, hopefully years before that, you've been affirming and encouraging so that there is a relationship that is open to that and even desirous of that. We have to work towards that, and by being open to that ourselves, to feedback ourselves, and even asking maybe for that kind of feedback.
Anything to avoid ultimatums, rushing to judgment.
To what he said, one-sided input. That baseline of affirmation is really, really helpful to being able to receive constructive criticism, because it's a sense of like, okay, they see a broader picture. They see it's not all down. It's not all bad.
Right.
They see the upsides and the downsides.
And to be humble and just step forward and say, is there anything I've done? Is there any approach I take that is just considered rude and not helpful and ungentle and proud or whatever? Is there anything about the way we handle the communication that could be improved? And just to be humble enough to receive something from either side.
Yeah.
I think one thing, to answer your question, that can be challenging is if there is a one-directional approach to feedback. In other words, if the parents assume that all the feedback should be going from parent to child and there's no apparent interest in receiving feedback and input. I think if what I need to grow in, what we try to do, what I need to grow in is being proactive and seeking input from Bill and Shay and my parents. But boy, it would be helpful to see that also exemplified in our own. It is helpful to see that exemplified in our own parents, of them proactively seeking input as well.
Yeah. I asked my children the other day, how do you perceive me?
Oh, boy.
How would you describe me? Give me a couple adjectives. It was interesting. That kind of stuff. And then, some positives and some, areas of improvement, et cetera. But just to open yourself up a little bit to, how can I improve in my relationship with you? Those sorts of questions can be helpful. Just kind of the broad
that's a humble
swipe
posture,
thing.
because that they're going to have a different lens than you do, or maybe even some of your peers. And it is really a good posture of heart to have, to go, I want to grow, and I know actually they have something for me that I can help with. I think if you're doing that kind of stuff a year before you think that they're parenting badly, that's going to go a lot better.
Helpful.
It's going to go a lot better. Yeah.
Okay. Any last words to encourage folks on what can be extremely sticky, difficult situations, relationships with married children? Bill?
Yeah, I'd say if you're going through a difficult time, assume that it's short term. Don't think that this is the way it's set and the whole future now is ruined. If there's a difficult patch, just anticipate that it's short term. We're going to get through it.
Hope in God.
Lots of hope that, and when you see the good stuff, just keep watering it and nurturing it, and anticipate that God desires for all that good stuff to be long term. And a few bumps in the road is going to be short term.
Todd?
I know that there's some people in very difficult situations in this realm. Can't speak barely, the communication is quite broken down. I really encourages the admonition about the church. I mean, we have to appeal to others. Maybe it's the church, maybe it's other wiser couples in the church. It's coming alongside our brothers and sisters and seeing how to navigate these things in this situation, and constantly working on, intentionally working on developing the relationship towards love.
Danny, how's it going with you?
I'm thankful for godly parents. We're blessed. And I think that just leads me to, and this may be my encouragement to any, in the children category, listening, to honor. That is
a commandment.
That is a commandment, and that applies to this. And that should lead us to, I think about honor as like, how can I make my parents happy with the way we're raising our family? Not just to please them and their whims, but how can I honor their vision?
Yeah.
They had a vision in the way that they raised us. Maybe we're going to do some things differently, but how can I honor them? How can I please them? How can we be proactive? I need to do better in that. But the flip side of that is it brings a lot of joy. I find a lot of joy in my relationship with my mom and dad and Bill and Shay.
That's a good place to end this conversation. Today, we've been talking about how to navigate relationships with married children. If you have any further questions, any development on this issue, mail@generations.org. That's the email you want to go to, mail@generations.org. And thank you, Todd, Bill, and Danny. Kevin Swanson, your host as well. We want to invite you back again next time as we continue to lay down a vision and disciple more dads. This has been a production of the Generations Media Network. For more information, go to generations.org/media.